Hi, Nolan, Bitcoiner. Another episode of The Breakup, a show where we look at our relationship with money. It's all about the psychology engines that drive our economy forward or back in some cases. We don't know, right? We're here today to talk about a few stories that happened over the weekend. Lots of talk about systemic risk. So I decided I'll do one on systemic risk management today. But first, a story to sort of set the context, right? Really important. And a bit of a theme of today's episode. So I'm going to be taking on a few people that are not Bitcoiners and sort of putting them forward because they might not be in your bubble. You might not actually hear what they say. You might have blocked them. You might have unfollowed them a long time ago. So these are people that might trigger you. So just let you know that I trigger myself on purpose a lot, right? So you don't have to. I try to trigger myself. It's really important, I think, in this time when we can all be singing from the same songbook, that we have views that might just bother us inherently. So I've deliberately picked a few names of irritating people. The first really irritating is Keith Olbermann, right? This guy is just tough. But I bring him up to give an important context. So Keith Olbermann, I liked him because I was into sports for a while and he was a sports guy, and then he went into a lot of politics. So usually his take is the opposite of mine, but I find it important nevertheless to get these voices through. So he did one of these things where he takes a video and films himself ranting about stuff. He's become known for these. And he did one of the day about how everyone who is unvaxxed is really a coward, right? They're all cowards. Let's call them what they are, cowards, he said, right? Now, I bring it up just to say that let's look at the other side of that for a second. And it's important so that we can go on to talk about systemic risk management. Who in the whole thing about vaccines isn't operating out of fear, right? That's not the only one thing I want to say to him, right? Is he the only one not operating under fear, right? Was it fear of the vaccine? Was it fear of anything? Social fear of bothering your neighbor, not doing a thing that would be seen as conscientious and thoughtful, right? All this to say, it's not even to say that Keith Olbermann is right or wrong, vaccines right or wrong. That's not the point, right? The point is to say that most decisions we make are actually out of fear. Before the pandemic, you might have thought we're rational and we collect a bunch of data and then at the end we make a conclusion, right? The show's not about that at all, actually. Like we don't believe that anymore. We used to think that at a certain point, but nowadays we know that there are other factors that motivate behaviors and choices, and we're all in the middle of that. And fear in this case is generally used as one of the most important factors when we make decisions. Now, what we do to manage our fear is we create systems. Systems are everything, right? Systems help us manage the fear. They help us hedge the risks of everything, right? So it really is a risk management idea that we can use to eliminate fear from our lives. What Keith Olbermann has done, right? And if I can, mind read him for a second, I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but I think what Keith Olbermann means to say is I'm not afraid of the virus because I've chosen a system of believe the science and they made these vaccines and I'm going to be okay. I think a lot of people think that, and I'm not arguing with that. To say there isn't any fear at the beginning is to miss out on why he believes in science in the first place, is to alleviate the fear, right? Gary Gensler, the SEC chair, gave a speech on about 5 or 6 days ago, but we're starting to get more details now and it's starting to be discussed more, where he says that there are systemic risks in the financial system that need to be rooted out and you need more reporting. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But Gary Gensler's system that he's chosen is basically the Wall Street regulatory system, right? We had Joe Biden the other day mention that there's perhaps a White House executive order on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, right? That's basically a system. And he says that the reason why there'll be an executive order is because of national security risk, right? So here, the system that Joe Biden is using is to listen to his generals to say there's an issue, right? We have national security, perhaps economic concerns are now at the military level, something that we talked about the other day, that world wars are actually a component much more than ever before of economics, right? It's not just about how many missiles do you have. There is a certain flexing of economic capacity that we are starting to see on the fault lines of what could be described as a world war. So everyone has a system to manage their risk, right? Everyone has a system. And most of those systems are actually designed to mitigate the fear that we can have of something breaking, right? But what could go wrong? And we build a system to manage that. So systems are really important. And we're talking about the psychology engine of the economy. Those systems are really important because, you know, that movie Dune that everyone loves and I love, and I even believe that one of the famous lines, "Fear is the mind killer," was already put into a crypto piece by Arthur Hayes, one of the only non outside of the box names I'm going to mention today, outside of crypto. Arthur Hayes wrote a great piece this summer called "Fear is the Mind Killer," right? So of course, fear has to be managed, right? It has to be managed. Now, what I'm going to do here is compare the risk management systems around the Federal Reserve and that of Bitcoin. Now, I'm not going to tell you which one is more risky. I'm just going to say it the best I can, right? I'm going to describe the risk management system of the Federal Reserve the best I can. Now, how hard is it to describe the exact detail of the risk management system? Well, I only have a little experience. I worked for a Senate banking committee. I did a lot of work with central bankers. I worked directly with central bankers at a certain point. I spent a lot of time in New York City working with early CoinDesk and watching all the first institutional piece of Wall Street come around Bitcoin. I did a lot of explaining to people. I started to see how all the pieces fit. You know, if you spend enough time in New York City, you can see how the Wall Street engine works. And I think I can see it that way. You know, I have a law degree as well. So the law degree really does help me to see a lot of these systems as engines, as motors, and we can sort of find out if you move one piece, then what happens. And the third part of my experience here is that I worked with Kraken for quite a while, and my file really was the bank in Wyoming and managing what the relationship with the Kansas City Federal Reserve would look like. And maybe you don't know this, but the Federal Reserve actually has like a UX UI. They have like a booklet for new customers, right? Just like your commercial bank would. It blows your mind what they actually do. It's like, how do you get to the Fed discount window and ask for $25 million minimum? Well, you go here and you go show your collateral. Da, da, da. I have all this stuff, which is wild, right? So that was something that I did. So I only have that experience. It's not a lot. And even I can't explain what's going on at the Federal Reserve, right? Apparently, it's not enough to work for a major G7 country, understand their banking, work with their Federal Banking Reserve, be in Wall Street for years, spend a lot of time in the New York Stock Exchange, and manage a relationship with a Federal Reserve Bank. And I can't really explain it to you. I'm going to do my best, but I can't really. If you want it explained, go talk to a guy like Rohan Gray, right? He seems to understand it a lot more than I do. He seems to have answers to all this stuff, no matter how complex it is. So I would definitely suggest going to see Rohan Gray if you need more information on more detailed information about the Federal Reserve. I'll do my best here, right? I'm going to do my best, but some people can do it better. Okay, so now the system that I've chosen here really just highlights this is a general matrix you can use to understand risk management systems, right? I'm not making up these in red: identify, plan, implement, communicate. That's sort of a general matrix for understanding risk management systems and the order and the flow. Now, the details I put in, I'm trying not to put too many details, just so you see the broad strokes and the shape of it, right? I don't want to put stuff in that's controversial or maybe debatable. We don't want to waste time on debate. We just want to see what systems are in place and what does the system look like and how we can compare them. So in the case of, let's do Bitcoin first, right? Here I've got Bitcoin in blue and green for dollars, if you can't really see that on the board. The key here is Bitcoin in blue, those are the risks when I'm talking about the system, and then green is the risk for the Federal Reserve. So Bitcoin, market risks, right? Certainly market risks. All of the coins that are listed, that can be included in a certain sense in Bitcoin market risks, because we can't go to the world and explain to every single person that this coin and that coin. I think most of the world just sees it all as Bitcoin, right? And then you've got other coins, and then things happen, and then it looks like the whole industry is getting painted with one brush, but that's just reality. There's nothing we can do about that, right? You can message, you can communicate, but for the average person out there, an exchange hack, Bitcoin eats it as much as anything. So market risk is part of the whole system, right? There's systemic market risk. Even as another news item today, I noticed that Blockworks mentioned a story where I guess they're describing crypto crash could be a systemic risk right now. The IMF has come out and said that a crypto crash would be a systemic risk to the global financial system, right? So this is all out in the news right now. There's a lot of priming around systemic risk and a lot of talk about it. That's why I've chosen today's subject on that. So there's definitely market risk in the case of Bitcoin. Then there's social risk, right? If a country decides, it's kind of a political risk, but if a country decides to attack Bitcoin, there are resources, they can do it, right? It is a risk that's been identified. There's the technical risk, like the technology has a risk, right? We all know that things can break and there could be a bug that we never saw, right? Here's the thing about cryptography. Only one person has to find the mistake in it, right? A million people can work on solutions. But if there's one mistake, it's an unfair fight. It's not fair. but one mistake can crash the whole thing, right? So that's just a reality of the technology. It's not the same as consumer technology where you can just run over a mistake in a Zelda game or in a Mario Kart game. There's a patch. Okay, you ship the patch. There's a glitch in the game. Well, in this system, in a cryptographic system, no glitches, no time for glitches, right? You can't have them. The cost is too great. The cost is in effect the whole system, right? So it can't have it. So those would be those risks. The case of the market risks, identifying them in central banking, they're very clear. I'm not going to go over them too long. These are the well understood, well agreed upon risks. There's market risk, right? So they've just said that crypto poses a market risk for the larger system. I'd say that's true, right? I'd say what the IMF said. If crypto crashes, there's probably a risk to the global financial system. They'll notice. It's not so small that it would go unnoticed. There's interest rate risk, right? So what happens if you raise interest rates to the economy? Well, they know that is a large risk right now. And everyone who's got loans, right? Everyone who's got some form of credit, that would definitely have a hamper on demand. And then inflation, another risk, right? That's sort of what they're managing towards all the time in the central reserve system, managing a targeted inflation, right? So those are the three identifiers. Those are the three things they're trying to manage. The three risks they're trying to manage. So now plan, that's the second piece, right? If you can see it here, plan. So in the case of Bitcoin, I won't go over it too much. It's BIPs, right? Bitcoin improvement proposals, right? So you identify risks here, either market risks, not much they can do about that. They can communicate other stuff, but we'll get to that later. There's not really much you can do on the part of market risk, but it's there. Social risks, certainly, there's a lot you can do. You can follow the hash rate. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on. And then of course, tech, right? That's where the Bitcoin improvement proposals come in. Now, on the case of the Federal Reserve System, this one here, monitor data, right? If you can see that, monitor data, right? When I say monitor data, I mean all the data, all of it, everything. They go as granular as first-time home buyers of condos in XY city. They look at all the data as it comes in. Any data is good, right? All things. They look at it, they ponder it, they think about it, but all the data is coming in. When Gary Gensler says they're going to create these new reporting requirements to manage some of the risk that he sees, right, when he mentioned that last week, what he's actually talking about are new reporting requirements that would come specifically for large private funds that are borrowing, using the repo market. He wants to see visibility on what they're doing for buying T-bills, getting cash, using the collateral. He wants to see the flow of funds. That's what he's asking for. More data on a class of people that were not really, that they didn't have oversight over, okay? And they write papers, right? They write academic papers, a lot of academic papers. That's a big part of it, right? A lot of academic papers. Now we go into implementation, right? Implementation. So in Bitcoin, the systemic risk management here, you run a node, right? That's sort of, you run the software and sort of manages the risks that come from the BIP and tech risks. And that's what you got to do, right? You run your node, you find out and maintain your own copy of the ledger and have some insight into what's going on. In the case of the Federal Reserve, it's rate adjustments, right? It's the throttling of sales of T-bills, right? Treasury bills. So they only sell so many when they're at auction to some people. And then new reporting requirements. That's part of implementation. But I will warn you, there's a piece here that's really not well understood. And it's part of the risk management, but I would be lying if I said people are actually watching it, monitoring it. You assume they are, but they're not. And it's something called the euro dollar, right? Euro dollar. I don't mean euros. It's not euros. Euro dollars are offshore US dollars, right? Offshore US dollars. They came about because, let's say Burger King is in Japan, right? So you got Burger King in Japan, and now they got a bunch of local Japanese bills to pay. So they got to pay them in yen, but they've got other stuff they want to pay back in America, the home office or whatever, and they got to send them, so they need US dollars. So Bretton Woods, if you go back to where this whole system started at World War II, they mandated demand for US dollars to clear all international transactions, oil, sending money home for treasury, all that stuff, right? So everything turned into, you needed dollars, right? You needed dollars. And that created this euro dollar. Now, at first, the euro dollar was just IOUs. Milton Friedman, the economist, said they were all created at the stroke of a pen. So if I owed someone abroad, I had to pay a bill in euro dollars, I would make sort of an IOU, and then there would never actually be dollar. Technically, there'd be no dollars created, but it would create liabilities, obligations on balance sheets all around the world that says there's US dollars on them, right? Now, here's the thing. We don't have any idea. To this day, no clue how many eurodollars there are. No one has any idea. Now we follow the M2 money supply, right? We always say M2, M2. Almost all of the data monitoring references M2. M2 money supply being money in accounts, money on digital ledgers all over the world, and not, pardon me, not all over the world, all over America. M2 monitors American deposits. It monitors American financial activity. It monitors whatever's going on domestically. It has no concept of what's going on internationally. It's ignored. We don't know the size of the eurodollar. So I mean to bring this up because it's an important part of risk management, right? So if the whole plan is to monitor data and then to adjust these numbers here so that it comes out right, well, the amount of money that's out there is pretty important. But we don't know, right? Now, I'm not saying that that is a fatal flaw. I'm just saying we don't know. We've been managing it for years. There was a very famous speech in the 1990s called Irrational Exuberance by the Fed chair at the time, Alan Greenspan. Irrational Exuberance, the subtitle was, where's the missing money? Who's filling all the demand for US dollars? Where's it coming from? How is it being created? So in the end, the conclusion was, well, rational, we can be exuberant. Things are great. People love the dollar. 1996, we're having a great time. But they still didn't answer the question. To this day, we haven't answered the question. We don't know. We just don't know. We go on and we don't know. I mentioned on the show Friday that demand for US dollars sinking because of what Russia was going through was a major change, a major difference. And it probably is. And if this Eurodollar thing goes away, I don't know the repercussions. I don't know. I can't tell. But it's got to be important, I think. We'll see. Anyway, all of these things are what they do. So they got the Eurodollar, we don't know, and then they do stuff to it, and then we don't know, and then maybe there's enough money at the end. That's sort of what's going on. Now, communication, right? So in the case of Bitcoin, right, fights, media, there's dedicated media, there's shows like this. But one of the peculiar things you're getting is generally a bunch of people like myself that take time out of our day to do this, that have been in Bitcoin for a long time and see it as a worldview thing and see everything through that lens. So you do have a lot of people who want to share information sort of at their own volition, not because it's a job or because we've been hired or anything like that. So that's one part of the media. You get another part that's, you know, they say toxic, there's a lot of fighting, but that's part of the risk management system, I would say, right? Good and bad, that's part of the risk management system. In the case of the Federal Reserve, they certainly have media following it much more than what we do in Bitcoin. We've got a couple of people, but they've got huge institutions. And then they got all these speeches, right? Where everyone, I remember when I was working in the Senate and they would come, they would have all these people that would monitor the markets whenever the central bankers were speaking. And they would say something and they would go, when they would say, you know, speculate too much. This is around the Greek debt crisis stuff. And you'd see them, they'd look at the markets, what happened? He said something, oh my God. That's really how they operate. I mean, I don't know what to say other than then I was surprised he would sit next to me where the researchers go in the Senate committee and these guys would just be doing that. So, but that's the thing, right? And that's why you see all this nervousness around some of the things they say. And when people are sort of trying to mind read what Jerome Powell meant and the market shifts because he didn't say a nice thing, that's because actually the speeches are a huge part of the risk management system, a really big part. They telegraph and signal direction, and therefore people try to divine what's been said. So that's the loop, right? So once it's communicated, that this part here is sort of an A/B test, right? You identify again after you've already communicated. So all of that stuff really in the end means these two systems are really different. Now, for me personally, right? Even though I was really close to the system, I still don't understand it. Like I can't really measure my risks. And I'll go back to what I said about the vaccine piece as well, right? What Keith Elberman at the beginning. Still to this day, I mean, I don't know my relative risks versus COVID and the vaccine. I'm not asking anyone out there to do the numbers for me. Each of us have our own specific risk profile when it comes to this stuff. So I'm not waiting anymore for anyone to say what my risk is one versus the other, right? You're on your own a little bit. You're on your own, actually. And when I look at the system, it's kind of the same deal. You're on your own. You got to choose which system you think manages risk better for, in this case, money, right? So for me, it's just a simpler risk management system. I don't have to worry too much about what's going on in the case of Bitcoin. And this other thing, I still don't understand the euro dollars. I don't like, I mean, I don't, right? I try, I don't. So you add up all this. In the end, the Federal Reserve System is really, a lot of people have to do the right thing for it to work, right? They gotta get it right each time. And I want to mention just one more thing for the day. Another fella who sort of triggers Bitcoiners. So I got Rohan Gray, Keith Olbermann, but who cares? He's not really a Bitcoin trigger. But Rohan Gray certainly triggers Bitcoiners. Another would be a guy named Kevin Muir. I followed him for central bank stuff before Bitcoin, and he's become really anti-Bitcoin, but I still follow him because he's got a lot of good material on central bank stuff. And he had a terrific guest on the other day, and I want to read just a couple of quotes from him. His name is Joseph Way, FedGuy12 on Twitter, if you want to follow him, FedGuy12 on Twitter. So this is a macroeconomics podcast without Bitcoin. It's pretty boring, but I listened. So this guy took a couple quotes out of the podcast. He says, the Fed is government. It's much more post office than bank. You can think of it as a business that can't fail, run by people who can't be fired. Can't be fired. Is that true? Right? Can they not be fired? Well, it turns out that a lot of these people, like the post office, right? You have a job and then you get promoted and then you're somewhere because they can't fire you and they had to promote you. What his observation in the end was, and it's pretty staggering. I wish anyone to listen to this podcast just to understand the dynamics inside the Fed. He gives a real insider's view of what's going on. And one thing he actually says is he says the people who actually make decisions, I thought it was really concerning about their level of competence. So what he observed was everyone who was doing operational stuff, day-to-day stuff, had a talent level that really impressed them, really knew their stuff. What he noticed was a lot of the people who actually make decisions, the top of the whole pile, usually didn't know what was going on. And that shocked him. It really shocked him. He tells a couple anecdotes. I won't steal too many stories, but he tells a couple anecdotes in this about how he noticed these decisions being made from time to time, and how he noticed people got promotions that certainly were not helpful for risk management systems. So that's why I bring it up. It seems like if the system is built on people, well, you should have a good human resources management system in place as a subsystem, but we don't really have that, right? That doesn't really exist. So that's what we got today. We got fear, we got risk management, right? We make decisions out of fear, and that's the way it is, right? And for me personally, when I'm to add up what I would be more afraid of, I'd be more afraid after living through this COVID experience of trusting a bunch of people to get the right answer coordinated and together that makes sense to me versus a system that, luckily I don't have to do too much to manage my risk.